Ooh. Okay guys, here is the install of my new manual jack plate from On the Fly Jack Plates. This will be actually the second model that I purchased. I have their original model on my Ginu, which I will be selling, and so I wanted to install a new one on my John boat so that I can sell the old one with my Ginu. And come to find out, some good news, they actually have increased the gearing with this, so it'll be even easier to operate. Now this model says that it actually is rated for up to a 30 horsepower engine, and it has a rating up to, I think it said 150 pounds. Yeah, 150 pound weight limit. I have noticed with the older model, my brother has the older model as well, and I have a 9.9 Mercury, he has a 20 horsepower Honda, and it was very difficult to raise his Honda. I literally had to, one of us had to pick up on the motor while the other one turned the manual jack plate handle. But this is supposed to have higher gearing, so I'm excited to see how much easier it is to raise and lower the motor. The advantage to the On the Fly jack plate, for those of you who don't know, is that you're actually able to change the motor position while on the water. So you actually do not have to loosen any bolts to adjust the height of the motor. You can just turn a handle. It has a actual jack in here that raises the engine up, which is a huge advantage if you're looking for a way to not have to use hydraulics or electricity. So let's go ahead and get started, get this mounted on the boat. I'm gonna take you through kind of the steps so that maybe if you decide to do this for yourself, you'll have an easier time. Wow, one thing you'll notice when you unbox this thing is no joke. This is heavy duty. So here are the three pieces you're going to see when you unbox the jack plate. So you've got your jack here for the middle, you've got the bracket that actually attaches to the transom of the boat. So here's where the transom of the boat would be, right here, and then here's the actual plate that your motor is going to mount to. The two bolts that come with the kit are the bolts that are actually going to attach here to the bottom of the actual jack, and then also attach that'll attach your jack to the transom mount, and then also attach the jack to the top of the plate your motor's attached to. It does not come with the stainless steel bolts that you will need to actually mount this to your transom. So you are going to need to go to the hardware store. I would suggest taking this with you and just getting the right size bolts for the width you need and for the length you need to get it to work on your transom here. Right now, I'm just getting my jack plate in the position that I want it. So I've got this super technical setup that you see right here, to get this set up to where I'm gonna put my bolt holes. Now, one thing that I've noticed for me, and everyone's different, I've got a short shaft motor, but I noticed that it goes down plenty far enough, but I wish I would have had more height. And there's a way you can adjust the height on the jack itself so that you're getting maximum height in the highest position. There's an alternate setting you'll need to know about, which I'm going to tell you about. But also, height is going to be determined by two other factors: how high up you mount your motor on the bracket that your motor mounts to with this jack plate, and also how high up you mount the actual bracket that attaches to your transom. So see right here, I've got it just about flush, which is kind of where most people would probably do it. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to raise this up a little bit higher, getting closer to the top. Not too close, because obviously you don't want to create any structural issues, but I want to get as close to the top as I feel like I can and it still be mounted securely, so that in the highest settings and the highest position, I'm getting my propeller as high up as I possibly can, and that's going to work best for what I'm doing. Okay, so I like this positioning. There's a couple ways you can do this to get your positioning where you want. This thing's pretty heavy, so what I did is I just found a way to basically block it and then chalk it to get the height that I want along the transom there. And then to get, because this thing is at an angle, so you want to hold it flush to the transom, so I just put a ratchet strap from the handles here and just tighten it down. So now I can make some adjustments left or right to make sure that I'm centered, and I can make sure that it's tilted right, you know, this way, and make sure everything's right before I mark my holes and start drilling. The hard part's done. As I'm checking, I've got my level on the boat itself. just kind of resting on the back of the boat, not the jack plate. And as you can see, it is dead level. And so now if I take the level and put it here on the jack plate, you can see here we are also dead level. So that's important. Check to make sure your boat is level first, because if your boat isn't sitting level and you level the jack plate, it's going to be crooked. So the jack plate is level, the boat's level, and then what I did was I moved it left and right until I got the exact same distance from the jack plate to this and from the jack plate to that. So we are totally centered. So now the first step is to go ahead and attach these top two bolts, and I've got it just where I want. It's a little bit down from the top of the boat, but enough to where it's going to hold really well. And I've got other adjustments I can make with the jack plate. If this ends up being too high of a mount, no big deal. There's other adjustments I can make. I just want to make sure I adjusted my motor as high as I could on the transom to start with. Got all my materials, my Marine 5200 sealant just to make sure everything is watertight, my 1/2" drill bit to drill some holes into the transom. I've got my 1/2" washers, my 1/2" nuts, and my 1/2" bolts that I got 3" long. I really wanted 2 3/4, but 3 inches all they had. And yeah, that one's a little bit longer. I just noticed that when I got home, the guy that was working there put them in the bag for me, and I guess he was having an off day, but that'll be okay. One being a little bit longer probably shouldn't be an issue. But anyway, got all that stuff ready, and now we're going to start drilling our holes and take it from there. All right, I just drilled this first hole out right here. As you can see, one thing to be careful of, I got this 1/2" bit. Go slow and be careful, because if you tilt this drill at an angle at all, left and right, up and down, you actually end up boring this hole out even wider here, which is, you know, slightly, if that happens, it's okay, but be careful, because you just don't want to end up boring this metal hole out wider while you're trying to drill through the transom. Beautiful. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is just tighten these down just a little bit. That is going to be perfect. And then of course the jack is going to attach down there and then up here. And I talked about that there's adjustments, there's multiple places to adjust the height of this. So you really have 3 ways you can adjust the height of your motor on this, apart from the actual manual jack. So if you count turning the actual jack that raises this plate up and down, that would be a 4th way. But there's 3 ways in just mounting that you can adjust motor height, okay, that you want to get correct before you put the motor on. Okay, the first is how high up on the transom do you mount the bracket. And as I talked about, I mounted it a little bit higher than flush because I want my motor to be on the higher end of things. Then secondly, there's these 3 holes right here, here, and here, and there's 3 of them down there. And where you attach your jack in these 3 holes also determines just how high or how low your motor can go. And then the 3rd way that you can adjust is how high or low on this plate do you actually mount your motor. And as I'm going to show you, I'm going to mount my motor as high as possible on this plate as I possibly can. Now, if I've messed up and I've got this mounted as high as it can, and I've got this just as high as it can go, and I've mounted my motor as high as it can possibly go, and I find that even in the lowest position my motor is not low enough in the water, then I can simply make easy adjustments here without having to actually reattach, like unscrew and reattach the whole system from my transom. I can adjust it right here. I'm going to go ahead and drill the next 2 holes. This is just a support beam right here. It is good to have it in place. It actually unscrews with a hex key right there. So I'm going to go ahead and unscrew that because it is going to get in the way, I think, of me drilling this hole. Woo! Now, one thing I want to make note of while I'm talking about it, this Grizzly all Weld 2024 John boat, they do tout that it has thicker aluminum on the transom, and buddy, they ain't lying. So this is a little bit more of a chore than I was expecting, but just take your time, back out when you need to, and we'll get it drilled. Woo! That was a chore. Ooh. Okay, I'm just reattaching this support bar, and I want to barely get it snug. It does not need to be really tight. Now that I like how everything is, before we do our final tightening, let's go ahead and apply our Marine 5200 so we can get this thing waterproof or won't leak. All right, so here's all my drilled holes. I went ahead and took the screws back out. I'm just gonna kind of wipe them off a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and put Marine 5200 around each one of these holes, and then we will put the jack plate back on, tighten everything down. See how that 5200 squished out the sides there? And you can see it squishing from down there, That's good. That is really good. That means that's going to create a watertight seal. So you can see some coming out behind the thing there. So that's going to create a watertight seal. I'll probably put some around these nuts as well, just to make sure, but I think we're good to go. Just wipe off this excess here. Nasty. Ooh, I'm gonna need to get some cleaner for that, apparently. All right, now I probably overkill everything, but I put some 5200 around the bolt holes before putting the jack plate on. But I also didn't want there to be a chance of water intrusion where the actual bolt head goes in here. So I also took some 5200 and kind of put it around that bolt head. And as it runs, I'm just using my finger to just make sure that it coats that little tiny space between the bolt head and the jack plate, because I wouldn't want any water coming in there either. So now that that's done, a little bit of a messy job. Now what I'm gonna do is we're gonna attach the actual jack. So I'm gonna put it in the actual lowest position on the plate that the motor attaches to. I'm going to put it on the highest position of the transom mount, and this is going to give me the highest motor positioning. Okay, so now you got the head, black spacer, and now we can put this nut on the back end and tighten her up. So because I've got this in the top position on the transom mount, then I'm going to mount this side on the lowest position where the motor goes, and that's going to give me the highest potential motor height. We do this, then we do the spacer. All right, so we have pulled the motor off of the old jack plate, off the GNU, and you see some additional holes here. I'm going to show you why that is, and I've installed it on the back of our John boat. Now, I talked about the positioning. So most people would let this just sit flush right here, and these are spacers, by the way. You may need these because this is a very narrow piece of metal that your jack plate attaches to, and the tightening adjuster right here does not go that narrow. So this is just starboard that has been cut into circles with a hole saw, and I'm using as a spacer. Now most people would just collapse that right on down to this part is flush with this part, but again, I'm trying to get as much height as possible out of this engine. So I've got it about as high as you can go, okay? And then what I'm gonna do, right here, the engine has these mounting holes on either side. So now that I've got the engine square and where I want it on the jack plate, I'm gonna drill a hole now through here and then bolt this, and we're gonna be good to go. All right, she is all attached, and then let me show you why I went to all the lengths that I did to make sure that I got this in the highest positioning. So as you can see here, the motor is mounted as high as it can be mounted, so these top adjustment screws here can be tightened in. It's bolted through there and there, so that's in the highest adjustment. The jack is installed. There's 3 different adjustment levels. It's installed in the highest adjustment level possible, and the part of the jack plate that attaches to the transom is also about as high as it can go. It's about a 1/2 inch higher than probably what most people would do it. So I've got it raised up in the highest position. If I go down and you look at the bottom of the boat, look where that propeller lines up. Pretty much right in line with the bottom of the boat. Now obviously I can trim the motor some. So if I turn the motor out, 1 click. Okay, now that's kind of where we sit. So at 1 click out, that is going to be great. So basically, as long as my boat is not touching the bottom, I'm going to be able to, even if I have to go slow, look at that, be able to run skinny. So she is all installed. Now we just got to hook up the electronics and everything else, and she'll be ready to go.